Okay, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to our 2025 Soil and Crop Conference. And we're going to jump right into it here. So to begin our conference this morning, we welcome Jake McKinnon, who is here to discuss the ALICE program. Jake is an advisor for the Alternative Land Use Services and Agricultural Stewardship programs, which focus on beneficial management practices for preservation of island soil and water and meeting island producers. And resources. One of Jake's favorite things about his role is getting on farm and meeting island producers. Most of Jake's time is spent on the ALICE program. He is proud to be involved in such a long-running and impactful program. ALICE, which aims to empower farmers and farmland owners in conservation and regenerative landscapes, currently covers over 9,000 individual sites, and that number is always growing.
Okay, I think we're all set now. Hi, folks. I'm Jake McKinnon. As Adam said, I work with the PEI Department of Agriculture on the ALICE and Ag Stewardship programs, and I'm going to jump right into it. We'll discuss the program a bit and some of our different BMPs that we cover, and hopefully it'll be of interest. Now, ALICE is a Payment for Ecosystem Services program. This was launched in 2008 after a successful pilot project in a couple of island watersheds. There's probably some producers in the room who participated in that, and we certainly appreciate that. Ecosystem goods and services are defined as something that benefits society coming from a healthy ecosystem. This would be, for ALICE, mostly focused on erosion control, water quality, wildlife habitat, and with these days, reducing the impact of climate change where available. Now, ALICE is entirely voluntary. It's basically an annual payment scheme that runs on 5-year terms. We tend to run the whole program every 5 years, so producers who come in that gap would generally be on a shorter contract when they first start and then fall into that 5-year schedule as we go ahead. ALICE is part of the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership as delivered by the Department of Agriculture. And it's also co-managed by the PEI Department of Environment, Energy, and Climate Action. Our annual budget is just over $1.5 million, and we're supporting just over 400 clients. We had a few adjustments to the program in 2023. This included some new BMPs, as well as the introduction as a variable rate payment system. This is focused on the different ecological value that comes from different what we call cover types. This would either be managing the area for forages, either for hay or for pasture, allowing the area to renaturalize on its own and just kind of grow up as you leave, basically leaving it fallow, or planting trees in the area actively and managing that to make sure it's afforested again as soon as possible. So with those different covers would come different payment rates. So I'll jump right into our different BMPs here. We have expanded buffer zones. This is kind of an oldie to the program. This is intended to protect watercourses and wetlands. We don't pay on the legislated 15 meters, but we will pay on anything beyond that. The intent is that we're hopefully reducing some erosion and some nutrient inputs that we'd like to avoid by protecting with these buffer zones. The only prerequisite is that the area should have been annually cropped since 2015 or already enrolled in the program. This is just part of our carryover between those 5-year terms. And then we'll jump into our new seasonally wet cropland here. This is intended to reduce nitrate leaching and nitrous oxide emissions, while also hopefully keeping out an area that you might not want to be working in anyway. I generally define these as a pothole through the field, spots you may have to make sure you have a chain on the tractor to get through. I think everybody has an experience with one of these at some point that they'd rather forget. So we try to get these out of production and shift them to the production of ecological goods and services instead. Again, they can be maintained for hay, left to renaturalize, planted to trees. It's entirely up to the client. And again, we want this to have been annually cropped or previously enrolled in the program. Now, another kind of ALICE classic that started with the program is the high slope cropland. The intent with this is to reduce soil erosion upland before it becomes an issue in the watercourses. We're looking at areas that are usually over 9% grade. And again, we want this to have been annually cropped since 2015 or already in the program. A lot of these tend to be in larger areas. You can see here we've got a hayfield behind us, and that's often what folks go for. And I'm thinking of some of the higher sloped areas in Bonshaw or something similar. We see a lot out there where folks are trying to maintain some pastures and still get some use out of that land at the same time. We also have our new field margin category. This is intended to be squaring up fields to make sure they're as efficient as possible. I usually define them as spots that when the field was cleared, you could fit a farm all in there, but now a 6-row planter doesn't turn around quite so nicely. So we tend to aim for those with this. The intent here is we're reducing habitat fragmentation. So we do want to see these areas either renaturalized or actively planted to trees. We don't allow the maintenance of these for forages. But at the same time, this also means that forage ground is eligible for this category. So any smaller sections that aren't really worth getting into to mow anymore, we can look at enrolling those as well. Another kind of regular to Alice is the soil conservation structures. This is usually terraces, berms, grass waterways, or natural hollows. And we want to make sure they meet a certain standard that's usually set by our soil conservation engineers, and they would have a look at that where necessary. The intent here, again, is to manage erosion upland, make sure that water is moving off the field as efficiently as possible, and we want to make sure these areas have been annually cropped before we install these structures. The installation of these structures can also be supported through the Ag Stewardship Program, which will then roll into ALICE and turn to annual payments after they're built. And you'll see that with a few BMPs here through the project as we go. This is another one here, our livestock exclusion from watercourses and wetlands. This is, again, an older BMP to the program. This just went in this year, this photo behind me. Now, the intent here is that we want to keep livestock out of watercourses just to make sure that either they're not depositing nutrients, we don't want them to, or actively physically damaging the watercourse with their hoof action as they move. So again, we can support the construction of these fences through Ag Stewardship and then roll them into ALICE afterwards for a payment kind of by the meter. So a longer fence tends to steer towards a higher payment, for example. And the idea here, again, is we want to maintain our watercourses as best we can. And we'll jump into our next one here. This is slightly different. This is our delayed hay. This is more of a active field management BMP year to year. The intent here is that we want to protect some ground nesting birds, specifically the bobolink, which has been listed as threatened. And the idea here is they want to come in, nest, fledge, and then hopefully they'll be moved off the field by July 15th, or at least mobile enough that when it comes time to either graze or to cut the field, the birds can kind of move on to greener pastures elsewhere. We started doing this just this year. Previously, it had been done by Sean Hill over at the Department of Environment, but we've kind of taken over for Sean, and we've started working with Alice Canada and the Island Nature Trust to hopefully deliver this as best we can. We've certainly learned a lot this first year. The Nature Trust is the big part of the auditing process with this program. They come out, I would say, 3 to 4 times in a season. They're out listening and looking for birds where they can. They want to make sure that they document that population. And if we see that maybe it's not the best habitat for the birds, if they're not showing up, then in that case we'll take it out and we can just kind of resume regular field management again after that. So we've got another new BMP here, our innovative agroforestry systems. This is quite a wide BMP. We have a lot of options here. I'm trying to think. We've got silvopasture, shelter belts. Pollinator hedgerows has been quite popular with nursery operators and blueberry growers and other berry producers. We've got a few other options that it's quite flexible. We don't go for traditional coniferous hedgerows just because they're already fairly prominent in the landscape and we don't feel the need to push those as much. This is another BMP where establishment costs can be supported through the Ag Stewardship Program and then again rolled into ALICE for annual payments. So I believe it's 50% or 70% for different projects under Ag Stewardship, And then annual payments, you can pay the site off quite quickly as you go down the line. I'll just briefly mention Operation Pollinator, which is actually an initiative from Central Canada, along with the PEI Soil and Crop Improvement Association. And we also deliver that with Cavendish Agri-Services. The idea here is that you'll receive enough seed for 2 acres to plant a kind of a mixed pollinator variety, usually a lot of legumes and some grasses. And you also receive $200 an acre for establishing that site. And anywhere that goes in, we'll look at that as a potential ALICE activity. You'll hear more on that about, I think, 11 or shortly after from Erica McDonald. So leave that to her for more detail, but just an option to consider when you're thinking about ALICE. Now, I won't go through this whole table, but you can see here all of our BMPs that I've listed. This is sort of our different payment rates scaled based on our grasses to our renaturalized areas to our forested areas, just to give you a rough idea so you can make an estimate if you're interested in the program. And I've got here a QR code you can scan to see our website if you're interested. You can also access our URL here or just directly email us with any questions or concerns. You can also find me. I'll be here all day. And if anybody has any questions, I'd certainly be happy to take them. Yep.
When this program was originally put in place, it was 10 years, and we got compensated for that 10 years. Then it went from there to 15 foot, or 15-meter buffer zone, and they took the compensation away from us. It's, in my opinion, in my area, it's created a problem. There's people on Facebook advertising these areas as walking trails. Liability is a problem. And that's an issue in my mind. Is in my area where I'm at, there's a high cape, and people seem to like to get down there and view the sights and one thing and another. But we're getting no compensation for it, and liability is an issue. And how are we going to fix that? You can put no trespassing signs up, and the next day you can go back and they may be gone.
No, it's certainly problematic to be facing that. Unfortunately, we don't really deal with the legislative buffer zone as much on our end, but we can certainly find somebody to have a chat with about that issue and hopefully find something to deal with that. But we can certainly have a chat afterwards.
And another thing is, too, in the last 2 hurricanes, there's lots of areas that that 15-foot buffer zone, or 15-meter zone is gone, and then we're required to move back another 15 feet. We're not getting compensated for it. I put a resolution forward at the Federation of Agriculture 2 years ago, and when they talked to, I don't know who they talked to, somebody in government or the ALICE program, and one of the suggestions was to get the land reassessed. Or I don't, with the technology that's out there today and these mapping systems, it should show that without having to hire somebody to do an assessment or whatever. But I'm a little disappointed that we're not getting compensated where we were before, and I guess that's my question: why aren't we? It's still in the beginning. It was part federal and part provincial, and all of a sudden it disappeared, and we got added another 5 meters to the buffer zone.
I can't really speak to that myself, but we can certainly find some of the folks who work around that and have a chat with them someday. I certainly. If we have an issue, we can certainly work to resolve it, but unfortunately I don't really deal with that myself, so I can't really speak to that.
Quick question. Yep, quick question, if I could, in regards to the hedgerow, windbreak, I'll call it, tree species, other than the coniferous, what are they? Could you list a few of those, please?
Generally, we go for native trees and shrubs just because we know they're going to be resilient here in our climate. A lot of times we look at, if folks are interested in some hardwood for value down, it's a bit more of a long-term investment, but value down the road, people would be looking at red maple or red oak or even some birch. Just those species tend to hold up better in the exposed wind of a hedgerow. We also look at some native shrubs, usually some ashes or even a few different berry varieties just to help feed the wildlife in those hedgerows. But again, it's sort of a site-by-site basis, and we're still actually working on that to determine what's going to be best in these. These are more, the few sites that have gone in have been a bit more experimental just to see what works and what doesn't. So there is certainly some guidelines, I believe, on the way to help steer people in making those decisions, but we don't have them ready
Mountain
yet.
ash would be part of that?
I think so, yeah.
Where can you buy mountain ash in commercial quantities?
There's a few nurseries around. We're hopefully going to have some more nursery capacity in the future, but that's again something that's being looked at. But there is kind of a handful of smaller nurseries. I wouldn't buy 1,000 of them, but they would certainly supply enough for some. With a number of different varieties, you only need so many for each site. So generally, we have enough capacity as it is to get established.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All good.
Thank you, Jake.